Okay, good to see you. People will be coming in the next couple of minutes, hopefully a couple more. Here we are after our August break. We're going to begin the sixth mind generation. That's generally how it's Chandrakirti divided the text. He calls it mind generation rather than chapter or even bhumi, although we can call it either way. In a sense, the most important section. So we're going to begin. Can I do that? Okay, good. We're going to begin with. Did I get? Maybe I shouldn't have done that. I took off the spotlight. I wanted to be able to see.
How did you do that if you're not the host? Anyway,
I don't know. It said something remove spotlight. So maybe that's what users can do if they're spotlighted. Maybe there's a little thing that comes. You could put it on again, and I won't do that. There you go. I'll just go off. And
okay.
Yeah, go to gallery so I can see you all. So we're going to begin as usual with some prayers, including the foundation of good qualities that Lama Khapa composed as a preparation for the class. And then we're going to do some meditation to set our motivation more intimately. So first of all, we'll start with taking refuge in generating bodhicitta and offering a mandala. Okay. So good. Oh, you have everything nice and ready. Okay. So try to think of the meanings as we recite the words. Sangye churang soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chune dagi chunen gipe sognam ki drola panchir sangye drupa shog. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kapsuchi dagi chunen gipe sognam ki drola penchir sangye drupa sho. So you think, until I'm enlightened, that's long distance off. That's our ultimate goal. And we're taking refuge in a Mahayana sense, not just in this lifetime to protect from problems, but as a guidance and as an aid, as a refuge to rely on that long journey to enlightenment. And then we'll offer a mandala as a condensation of all the methods of purification and accumulation of merit. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. So that means the vast means the extensive, the teachings on conventional truth, and the method side, and the profound Dharma means the wisdom side, precisely in accordance with the needs of those trainees, whatever is needed. Idam guru rana mandalakam niryatayami. So we will now recite the foundation of good qualities.
Venerable, did you mean to skip the short mandala offering?
I think no. Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. That was actually, I did skip that.
I moved forward, and maybe that's what happened.
Yeah. So let's offer the mandala. I was thinking that I was offering the mandala as the request to turn the wheel of Dharma. So first we visualize the mandala. Sashi Poki Jukshin Meto Tramri Rablingji Nide Gen Padi Sange Jindu Mikte Ulwargi Drokunam Dakshingla Chupasho. So the sense of this is imagining the whole universe, our world system multiplied, multitude of times with the sun and moon and so forth, the four continents, transforming those realms that sentient beings live in into a pure realm, and offering it to the Buddhas with the ultimate intention of achieving enlightenment for their sake. In other words, may all migrators enjoy such a pure realm. Okay. So, Foundation of Good Qualities, Lama Tsongkhapa composed. So if you could just move up a line or two. There you go. Just so Yonden Kungi Shirgyur Dinchen Che, Sushin Tempa Lamgi Sawa Ru. So Sawa means root, Lam is path, Lamgi Sawa means root of the path. Tempa means to rely on or to follow. Here, this text says to follow the guru. So the translation says the foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect guru. Actually, the text says the foundation, the root of the path is relying appropriately on the kind and perfect guru, who is as the foundation of good qualities. So let's go through this in English. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect guru. Correctly following the guru is the root of the path. By my clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon the guru with great respect. So this is the first meditation, sort of glance meditation on the stages of the path. So if you're already familiar with the meditation on guru devotion, recognizing their kindness and qualities and so forth, the benefits of relying on the guru, you will be able to integrate a meditation at that point on that. When I have discovered that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is extremely difficult to find again, and is greatly meaningful, please bless me to unceasingly generate the mind, taking its essence day and night. So this is the thought to urge one to make use of this life, sort of what we usually say, the meditation on the perfect human rebirth, or this auspicious moment that we have, comes so rarely. It's as though only once, and is easily lost and difficult to find again. So to take that as one's special effort to make use of it while you have it. This body and life are changing like a water bubble. Remember how quickly they perish and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. So these two verses, this and the verse coming that I'm going to recite next, are together combining impermanence and karma. When I have found a definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be conscientious in abandoning even the slightest collection of shortcomings and accomplishing all virtuous deeds. That means to recognizing that death may come at any time, and that what we will experience in the future next is a result of our karma. We make an effort to abandon all negativities, even the slightest ones, because they will multiply in time, and to collect all the virtuous karma that we can. When I have recognized the shortcomings of the samsaric perfections, that there's no satisfaction in enjoying them, that they are the door to all suffering, and that they cannot be trusted, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. So in explaining that verse, Lama Tsongkhapa explained that it's talking about the 6 sufferings, which can be condensed into those 3. If you could just move up to that verse again. Yeah. So when we talk about there is no satisfaction in enjoying them. That's the suffering of not finding satisfaction. They are the door to all suffering. That is the suffering of taking rebirth without choice, again and again. So it's the door to all suffering. And then all of the other 4 of the 6 sufferings are encompassed in that they cannot be trusted, that the rising and falling, uncertainty, dying, not knowing the time of death, not having friends, and so forth. Those are the 6 sufferings in general of the upper realms. Through my being led by this pure thought with great mindfulness, great remembrance, alertness, and conscientiousness, please bless me to make keeping the pratimoksha vows, the individual liberation vows, the root of the teachings, my essential practice. So as a basis of all our practice, to try to keep our lay vows or monastic vows, just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, it's not as though we've just fallen now, just as I am, immersed in the sea of samsara, so all mother transmigrating beings are the same. By my seeing this, please bless me to train in supreme bodhicitta, which bears the responsibility of freeing migrators. So what this is talking about is to generate bodhicitta, especially through the method of equalizing and exchanging self and others, equalizing that I'm in exactly the same situation with other sentient beings. We're both immersed in this ocean of cyclic existence without, a sure way of getting out of it. So feeling compassion for sentient beings for that reason, please bless me to train in supreme bodhicitta. Even if I develop mere bodhicitta, that means wishing bodhicitta, without familiarizing myself with the 3 types of morality, or without, rather than familiarizing, without cultivating the 3 types of morality, I cannot achieve enlightenment. So wishing bodhicitta alone is not enough. We need to have engaging bodhicitta. By my seeing this well, please bless me to keep the vows of the conqueror's children, the bodhisattvas, with fervent effort. So that is talking about, it's not enough just to have wishing bodhicitta. We have to have engaging bodhicitta, and engaging bodhicitta means to keep the vows of the bodhisattva. Having having pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to quickly generate within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. So the first line, having pacified distractions to wrong objects, refers to shamatha, the calm abiding, so that you are no longer distracted by objects. And then with vipassana, or special insight, having correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, the ultimate meaning, please bless me to quickly generate this unified path of calm abiding and special insight that realizes emptiness. When I have become a suitable vessel for the tantric teachings by training in the common path, please bless me to immediately enter the holy gateway of the fortunate beings. Shankar, could you move up a little bit? There we go. The supreme of all vehicles, the Vajrayana. So there were verses about impermanence and death, karma, keeping our pratimoksha vows, generating bodhicitta, the need to generate bodhicitta, and then the meditations on, especially of the bodhisattva practices of meditation on emptiness. Now, having understood the sutra path, when I've become a suitable vessel by training in the common path, it means in order to practice the Vajrayana, the tantric path, one has to have trained in the common vehicle of the Sutrayana. As once we've been trained in that and become a possible vessel for the teachings of Tantrayana, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate beings, the supreme of all vehicles, the Vajrayana. At that time, when I enter, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments, the common cities and the uncommon city of enlightenment, the basis for that is keeping my vows and samayas purely. The vows, tantric vows, and the samayas. The vows are things that you vow to abstain from doing, and samayas are generally promises that you make to do. When I've gained effortless conviction in this, please bless me to protect them even at the cost of my life. So to keep one's vows even at the cost of one's life right now may not seem possible, but once one sees and one has developed conviction in this, one is willing to give up even this transitory life for the sake of keeping those vows. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the two, I just read that. Then when I have realized exactly and precisely the vital points of the two stages, the generation stage and the completion stage, which are the essence of the tantric sets, and am enjoying the yoga of 4 sessions with effort, is practicing every day continually 4 times, say after sunrise, before midday, after midday, and say in the afternoon, and then after or before sunset, 4 times, without being distracted by non-meditation objects. Please bless me to accomplish these according to the teachings of the holy beings. Then, sort of like a dedication, thus may the virtuous friends who reveal the holy path and the spiritual practitioners like myself who correctly accomplish it, my spiritual friends and practitioners, our classmates, please bless me. May they have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely the collections of outer and inner obstacles. Outer obstacles and inner obstacles. Of those, the inner obstacles are the delusions and so forth. In all my lives, may I never be separated from perfect gurus. May I enjoy the magnificent Dharma, and by completing the qualities of the crowns and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. This verse often is found in many of the prayers, even in the Kargyu Nyingma, other traditions. In all my lives, may I never be separated from perfect gurus. They have that very strong prayer. I think of Venerable Sangye Khandro when she was explaining about her life at Kopan in one of the examinations that Lama Yeshe used to have. She mentioned how even as a child, she had this strong wish to find her guru. So I can surmise from that in her previous life, she made that kind of prayer. May I never be separated from perfect gurus. And even from the time of youth, looking to find one's guru. May I enjoy the magnificent Dharma, which means the protection of one's mind, having actualized in one's mind the realizations of the path. And by completing the qualities of the crowns and paths, the 5 paths and the 10 grounds, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Okay. So, a couple more have come in. Hi, Suvansh. Hi, Anna. Sheila. So we're going to begin again with a little meditation. So sit yourself comfortably. Relax your body. Relax your mind. See if you can notice your heartbeat. It's not something that you have to generate. In the same way, see if you can notice your breathing. It's not something you have to control. Just watch its natural progression. Once you've recognized it, hold it with mindfulness. To the exclusion of everything else, recognizing when you're breathing in, whether it's a long breath or a short breath. Recognize when you're breathing out, whether it's a long exhalation or a short exhalation. This is not the time for multitasking. Don't use this sort of being mindful of the breathing with part of your mind and thinking about something else. In the end, practitioners of this kind of meditation are said to develop a mental image of the subtle air element, wind element, that which is light and moving. So with your mind partially, a little bit subdued, removing your attention to the thoughts that you were engaged in before, now move your attention to a more subtle object, the mental consciousness, and its nature, its conventional nature. Even to find the mental consciousness itself is difficult at first. You have to recognize it by noticing its content, because the nature of the mind itself is very subtle. There are memories, plans, observations about the present, say thoughts of the three times. There are emotional states or afflictions. There are perhaps positive states of mind, mental factors. There are conversations going on in your mind. Rather than focusing on the thoughts, focus on the space between the thoughts when there's a moment of clarity, of calmness. Try to enlarge that moment of calm. Even when the thoughts are present, recognizing that by not focusing on the thoughts, they will dissipate. Try to perceive the underlying nature of the mind that lies beyond the thoughts. This clear light nature of the mind is said to be space-like. Doesn't mean the color of blue like sky. It doesn't mean our imagination of outer space being black. It means not having any obstruction to the arisal or dispersal of thoughts. This nature of our present consciousness is always there. The Buddha called it our conventional Buddha nature, our developmental Buddha nature. The fact that we can develop all good qualities within our mind. There's nothing that is beyond our ken. We can eliminate all the faults. And this can give rise to a feeling of peace and satisfaction and confidence and optimism, blissful state of mind. The fact that we can recognize this developmental Buddha nature is a result of our having this auspicious moment of a life of leisure and endowment, which, as we mentioned a moment ago in the foundation of good qualities, is lost quickly. It's changing moment by moment, and it's difficult to find again. From that perspective, recognizing that we can use this very special moment of having a human rebirth, having met the Dharma existing, the realizations existing in the world, not having any difficult obstructions to our practicing the Dharma. We can practice it in whatever situation we find ourselves, rather than using this life to achieve the happiness of this life alone, or to achieve power, control of others, possessions, so forth, the 8 worldly concerns which we have up till now let dominate our aspirations. We can use this life to develop the qualities that can help us escape from cyclic existence, to find liberation, nirvana, or more importantly, more supremely, we can choose instead to aim for the state of enlightenment, when we would be, all of our aims will be fulfilled, will be totally blissful, in control, but particularly aiming for that state, not for ourself alone, but because of the fact that it allows us from that enlightened state to liberate other living beings, to lead them out of suffering into everlasting blissful happiness. All living beings have been our mother numberless times, have been depthlessly kind, even if we don't recognize it. Even the politicians that we hate, or the leaders, or the criminals, or the whatever people that you find objectionable, have all been our mother numberless times in the past. We will meet them again and again to work for their welfare out of compassion for them, out of love for them, is the bodhisattva way, the bodhisattva way of life, to take up the practices of the 6 perfections for their benefit, taking up those perfections in order to accumulate the 2 collections of merit and wisdom, which are the cause of the form body and the wisdom body of our eventual enlightened state. In order to do that perfectly, we need to know the method and wisdom sides of the teachings, how to accumulate merit, how to accumulate wisdom, both of which subjects Chandrakirti explained in his epic Madhyamaka Vatara, Entry into the Middle Way, and which Lama Khapa in his Gompa Rapsal, Illuminating the Intent, explained in more detail. So think in this context of the class being given, I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate on the material in order to accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom, in order to become a Buddha for the sake of leading all sentient beings out of suffering into everlasting happiness. I'm going to participate in the class in order to become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So that takes the onus off of us, fear of being criticized or not doing well. Whatever we do, whether we're criticized, whether we're right, whether we're clever, whether we're stupid, we're working for the benefit of sentient beings and integrating what we learn when we're criticized, when we make errors, into our mind to become better. When it's noticed that we've done something correctly, to accentuate that, to increase that quality. So this is our aim in listening to the class. Okay. Bringing your attention back present. So we're missing a couple of our stalwarts today. I'm not sure where John and Paul. Do you know, Snehi, do you know where Jennifer is?
I think she is probably on her way back.
Okay, maybe she's still on her way back.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we begin, any questions, comments, observations? Anything?
I had a question. So a few weeks ago, Venerable Rene mentioned that he had never, he was, this is regarding the concentrating on the space in between the breaths. And he mentioned that he had not seen that or even though that is it's talked about or during meditations, he had never seen that anywhere in the scriptures. Do you know of scriptures where that is spoken about?
So I'm not quite sure the context. The space between.
Well, when you mention in the meditations, during your meditation, you mentioned that concentrate on the space between the thoughts or the breaths. And
not between the breaths.
Between the thoughts, I see. You mentioned between the thoughts. Okay.
Yeah,
he was talking about between the breaths. That people mentioned that as well, and so he mentioned that he has never seen that although it works. He said that he has never seen that in any scripture. But anyway, okay.
Yeah, I don't know what that's referring to. The space.
Well, if you, for example, various, like Sogyo's book, I read that first in Sogyo's book, Tibetan Book of Living and Dying many years ago, and that helped me a lot when I started, and that he spoke about concentrating on the space between the breaths, where there's this kind of a space where your mind is not moving.
Okay, so we mentioned that many times in earlier classes when we talked about that, that at the moment when let's say the exhalation is just reached its apex, right, and is about to change into inhalation, it's at that moment as you have nothing sort of firm to grasp onto, the mind can kind of wander. So it's important to concentrate and try to notice the exact moment when it changes. Perhaps that's what is being meant there, to concentrate on that space between the breaths.
Right, and that's what Venerable Rene was mentioning, that he has certainly heard that many times, but he has never read that in any scripture, and that was his comment. So that was kind of like what stuck with me.
Okay, good. I'll see if I can find something for you and Rene if there's some mention of that in the scriptures. So we have someone new, Sandy. Hi, Sandy. Where are you? Are you?
Hello.
Hi. Where are you?
I am in California, Montebello, California.
Okay. This is your first time joining?
Yes.
Okay. Nice to see you. So anyone else have an observation or question they wanted to get off their chest? Any Dharma itch they needed scratching? No? Okay. So when we began when I was studying Gompa Rapso with Geshe Sopa, Lundup Sopa, over, I think it was 6 summer courses at Deer Park. We met for a month each time, 5 days a week, morning and afternoon. It was very, very intense. Lama Zopa Rinpoche was there almost all the time, other than when he needed to go off teaching somewhere for some short time, but he was always there studying. When Geshe-la would introduce in the morning, he would always read a verse of motivation. And I wanted to try to integrate some of the verses that he chose because they were very relevant and moving. And so I'm going to read a little bit here from a verse that Geshe-la gave 2 times, once in, so 6 is June, right? So the June 28th in 2002, and again in June 27th in 2005. So he mentioned it 2 different times, this verse that comes from the Kadampa Pacha. Does anyone know what the Pacha is? If Paul or John were here, they might know. Pa means father. What are you thinking, Shaka?
Never mind. I was thinking about something else.
Yeah. So there are the text, the father texts that are so talking about Atisha and so forth, and the son texts talking about Drangdempa, his spiritual son. So this is available in translation by Thupten Jinpa in the Book of Kadam, and I have the cover of it, but I don't have it right easily to show you. You can find it on the Wisdom bookstore, the Book of Kadam. And so let me read you this verse that Geshe-la mentioned 2 different times in 2 different years, a couple years apart. Just for auspiciousness, I'll read the Tibetan first. Milu Truyi Midanga. Mi means human, Lu means body, Dru means boat, like the kind of boats they had in Tibet on the rivers that had so skin over wood and so forth and so on. Milu Trui Midang Da. Kamla Chinnam Gyatso Chi. Kam means dry or dry land. Kamla Chin means you either reach the pure land, the dry land, or Gyatso Chi, you die in the ocean. Shisun Barna, between life and death, or between death and life. What do we say? Life and death usually is what we say in English in a positive sense, but between death and life, because we abide there between death and life, Gelte Trudang Niensang Na. If, however, you have an excellent boat and an excellent captain, guide, Kampe Nesu Chimpa Si, it's possible to reach your destination of the dry land. If you are without those 2, if you are out a good captain and a good boat, the reverse is true. You will die in the ocean. Lokte Gyatso Chipargyur. Okay, so Geshe-la he translated it kind of like this: the human body, like a human in a boat, crosses over to dry land or dies in the ocean because of abiding between life and death. If there is a fine boat and captain, it's possible to arrive at a dry place. If that is not the case, or in other words, if you don't have those 2, good boat and a good captain, the opposite, one will die in the ocean. In Thupten Jinpa's book, that comes in chapter 12, if you happen to have that book. Does anyone have that book, the Book of Kadam? Nadine? Yeah? Snehi? Few people. Very worthy. Worth whatever you have to pay. It's in chapter 12, which is that chapter is called, in his translation, How to Hoist Your Robes to Cross the something of desire. What does it say here? I have to put on a second pair of glasses to read this. The mires of desire. I'm not sure what that means. And so this quotation is on page 253 and 254. He translates it like this: human life is like passengers in a ferry. Geshe said the human body is like a human in a boat. They'll either reach the dry shore or die at sea. Between life and death, it's like splitting of a barley grain. So his text, I have the Tibetan of his text. He has a slightly different Tibetan of that. Instead of the word chir, which means because, he has che, which means cutting. It's like, or splitting. It's like the splitting of a barley grain. In other words, between life and death, it's very, very close. It's like a toss-up whether you're going to live or die. For if the ferry and the oarsman are excellent, it's possible they will reach dry shores. If the two are lacking, however, it will be the reverse. They will die at sea. So that's essentially the same translation. Interestingly, I'll just read the next verse that comes right after that in that text. It says, as for those who rely on the boat of human existence, all right, that's what our boat is here. That's our life of leisure and endowment. If their leisure, opportunity, and teachers are excellent, they will journey to the other shore of liberation. So we have, in a sense, a good boat. We have this auspicious moment of leisure and endowment. And if we have the opportunity of having teachers like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and so forth. If we have those, they will journey to the other shore of liberation. But those who lack such support die in the ocean of cyclic existence. Thus, this juncture is the turning point. Recognizing this. We're out at sea. We didn't notice it before. Someone points out, you're out at sea. You have to check whether you have a good captain, or what does he call it? Oarsman. He calls it oarsman or captain or guide. So until this juncture is destroyed, this auspicious moment is lost, steer the boat to a human life to secure ground. Secure ground. In this life, do not let this boat be swept away by the dangerous waters of illness and miseries. Bless me so that I will become an excellent oarsman myself, who will set all beings free on the other shore of cyclic existence. Help me that I may develop true renunciation. So the book of Kadam, which Thupten Jinpa, along with some others, translated, has the sort of the very basic teachings of the Kadampa tradition, Atisha and Dromdampa, who were the basis of all of the other Tibetan traditions that came after them. And this text is revered very much by them.
Venerable?
Yes.
What page are you on?
This is on pages 253 and 254 in that edition by Thupten Jinpa, 253 and 254. It's at the end of 253 where it says, human life is like passengers in a ferry. Do you see that?
I'm about to get there. 253.
Yeah, at the bottom.
Oh yes, if the ferry and the oarsmen are excellent, it's possible that they reach dry shores. Yes.
Right. Okay. So Geshe-la's commentary said at the time, this means the milu jui mi dangda, our human body or in human life is like a human inside a boat. Kamla chinnam gyatsurchi, when you go to the ocean or some big body of water with people in a boat, because you may die in the ocean, or from here, you can go to dry land and be safe. Shison barna ne chirte, you are only abiding, remaining like that between these two places, between death and life. Yalte Gelte Trua Dang Nansang Na, if the boat and also the Nempa, the captain of the ship, or Jimpa translates oarsman, are good, if they're excellent, the people in the boat may get out to a dry place where they want to go, to the, in this case, dry place means liberation or enlightenment. Gelte Dini Megurna, if one of these is lacking, if there's not a good ship, if you don't have a life of leisure and endowment, for instance, if you don't have, on the other hand, if you don't have a good captain, even if the boat is good, but the captain is not good, you don't have the proper teachings, you can be led astray. You can have a perfect human rebirth and be led astray. Like, who was the famous Jim Jones, remember, leading the Christian people that were following him. In the end, they all drank Kool-Aid with arsenic or something in it and died. If the boat is good, but the captain is not good, or vice versa, if the captain is good, but you don't have a proper life of leisure and endowment, you don't have accumulation of merit and so forth, or if both of them are bad, then the opposite is true. They will die in the ocean of cyclic existence. That means they will perish, keep on remaining there. So therefore, they are always in that kind of situation. We too, our human life is like that. We are always traveling in the ocean of samsara. This human body is like our boat. Of course, we have this good boat of a human life, and also and among the humans, one of the best kinds of high standard of human life. Every faculty, mental organ, human intelligence, we have good environment, the highest standard of human life. So therefore, we have a good boat. In addition, our Nempa, our ship captain, a good captain or leader, our friend, is like, in our world, Buddha appears and gives excellent teachings, the best, highest teachings. The teachings are valuable, and the continuity of experience and practice also has come down to us without missing anything, without any interruption, to lead us over the ocean of samsara, especially the lower states of the ocean, and even to free us completely from the ocean of samsara. So it can protect us from falling in the ocean, going down, and can lead us not just be wandering in the ocean, but actually to dry land. We already have that kind of path of emancipation, how to fully accomplish that. So therefore, teachings and teachers, outside conditions are valuable. So the teachings are coming to us from the outside, and the teachers are coming from us from the outside. There's outer conditions. People, practitioners, and supporters in many other conditions are valuable. Therefore, Nyempa-sang, the captain, or the excellent captain who drives the ship, we have these outside, inside that way, both outer conditions and inner conditions. So therefore, if both are good, both of them combined, it will be very possible to reach completely dry place. That means emancipation, freedom from samsara, nirvana, or Buddhahood. That is our potential. We have this wonderful situation. So especially our present study, teaching, learning is key, most essential. Among Buddha's own teachings, the best is the subject of the Prajna Paramita Sutra that we have begun to discuss. That has two sides, the conventional, the Mahayana method side, and especially the wisdom side. Perfect wisdom which directly realizes the ultimate truth, which removes the root of all of the delusions, all the afflictions and obstacles, the causes of samsara. All of these can be rid of, they can be abandoned. So therefore, in order to do that, we have to develop this special kind of wisdom which properly understands ultimate truth, shunyata, and also conventional truth. Both truths have to be properly understood. This is the basic thing. That was motivation Geshe-la gave on 2 occasions during the course. So interesting that verse, from this famous book of Kadam, from the Father teachings, so they're related with Atisha. And there's another section of the book called the Son teachings, related with Drondempa, his main disciple. Okay, so with that as motivation, we're going to begin with the 6th chapter. So some of you may already, all of you have Thupten Jinpa's book, Illuminating the Intention. Some of you may also have this book by Anne Klein, Path to the Middle, or you may have the PDF of it. So in that text, this is, if you have the digital text, we're starting on page 149 of that. And the 6th ground in the book, what page is that, by the way?
It's on page 157.
So 157 in Jinpa's book.
Yeah.
And 149 in Anne Klein's book. Okay. So I'm going to be reading from Jinpa's text here, introducing the 6th ground. And then the subtitle says, explaining the 6th ground, the manifest. So this is the name here in Tibetan is Ngundu Gyurpa. So it means Ngundu Gyurpa. Those of you who studied before, we talked about manifest phenomena and hidden phenomena. Ngungyur usually means manifest. So there's different meaning here. Why this ground is called the manifest is also called approaching, and we'll see that in a moment. This section, the 6th ground, has 4 parts. The etymology of the name of the ground and its superiority in wisdom. That's 1. That's short. The praise of the perfection of wisdom. That's the 2nd one. 3, explaining reality in terms of seeing profound dependent origination. That's the main, hundreds of pages, that 3rd outline. And 4th, a conclusion stating the qualities of the ground. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is just talking about, I'm not sure that's outline of the whole 6th ground, but maybe. So Thupten Jinpa's text says, the etymology of the name of the ground and its superiority and wisdom. This is the first outline. And Klein's translation says, etymology of the ground, an indication that the perfection of wisdom is surpassing, sort of more in Jeffrey Hopkins' terminology. In fact, Jeffrey Hopkins acted as collaborator on her translation of the text there. Let me try something here. So we've got a new camera where I can put myself there. Is that a little bit better? Okay. So it begins with the first verse of Chandrakirti's Karikas of the 6th Bhumi, of the 6th mind generation. On directly facing, that's what Jinpa is translating this name of the 6th ground. On directly facing, he abides in the mind of meditative equipoise and turns to the attributes of perfect Buddhahood. This bodhisattva who sees the truth of dependent origination attains true cessation by dwelling in wisdom. So Anne Klein translates it. So Jinpa had said directly facing, right? So Anne translates it as approaching the qualities of a perfect Buddha and seeing the suchness of arising dependent upon this, due to which they abide in wisdom, bodhisattvas on the manifest, abiding in equipoise, attain cessation. So a little bit different translation. So what does this mean? Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary says, having attained on the fifth ground previously, so we just finished the fifth ground, right? So on the fifth ground, what was the surpassing practice of perfection? Do you remember, Diana? What was the perfection on the fifth ground that was surpassing? Oh, you know. Perfection, concentration, right? So of the six grounds, say first ground, there's a surpassing practice of the perfection of generosity or charity. Second ground, morality. Third ground, patience. Fourth ground, enthusiastic perseverance. Fifth ground, dhyana. You can call it concentration or absorptions. So there was a special practice there where the concentration got especially acute, so that now that can act as a basis for furtherance of wisdom. So having attained on the fifth ground a thoroughly pure perfection of meditative absorption, the bodhisattva on the sixth ground abides in the most excellent mind of meditative equipoise on the sixth ground, namely directly facing or the manifest. So the word in Sanskrit, and I didn't write it down right here. The word in Sanskrit can be translated either as directly facing, or as what did Anne translate here? Approaching. So when you're facing something, you're approaching it, or you could be approaching it. Of course, you could be facing it and going away, right? But the sense is, the word has a sense of looking at something, getting closer. Okay, Jimpa just translates it as directly facing, but in many contexts it means approaching. So on the sixth ground, you're approaching Buddhahood, or you're facing Buddhahood, and it's also called the manifest. Okay.
Venerable?
Yes.
I think the Tibetan is different. There are two words for the sixth ground, or?
Right. So when you get down to the Sanskrit, they are Tibetan translations of the same Sanskrit word.
Okay.
So that word can be translated as approaching or facing, or the manifest. Thus, this bodhisattva on the sixth ground, who on this basis sees the profound truth of dependent origination, of mere conditionedness, attains true cessation because of his or her dwelling in the most excellent perfection of wisdom. So what's this talking about? Anyone have idea? What is mere conditionedness? Klein translates this with this as a basis, and she has a nice way of it. S/he, so it could be she or he, rather than say she. So sort of gender inclusive, and being a woman, obviously, doesn't like the sort of paternalistic, translating everything as him, bodhisattva as him. With this as a basis, he abides on the sixth bodhisattva ground, seeing the profound suchness, which is mere conditionality or dependent arising, whereby she or he attains cessation. So this term that she translates as mere conditionality, that Jimpa translated as what? Conditionedness, mere conditionedness. This is the famous term in Sanskrit, idam pratyaya tattva. You won't know this when I say famous. In Tibetan, Kenni Dipa Deni. So this is a very sophisticated term. You can find it in the Pali canon also. Because of this, that arises, kind of like that. Because of this condition, there is that. Like when we talk about the 12 links, just in an elementary form, we don't say that one link is the cause of the next. We say that one link is a condition for the next link to arise. So this is what's being talked about here is conditionedness by Jimpa, or mere conditionality. Is that what she translated? Ken means condition in Tibetan. Ni, the term that comes after it, can mean mere. Dipa Deni, Tattva. Okay, so thus this bodhisattva on the sixth ground, when we're saying thus, what does that mean? On the fifth ground, they develop this very, very special concentration. So now on the base of that concentration, they can develop a deeper understanding of wisdom, that even though they had practice of the perfection of wisdom from the first bhumi, on the second bhumi they had practice. They didn't have a surpassing practice of it until now, until the right condition was met of having the basis of that very firm concentration that was developed on the fifth bhumi. This thus, now being on the sixth bhumi, having achieved the fifth bhumi, the bodhisattva on the sixth ground, who on this basis sees the profound truth of dependent origination, of mere conditionedness. So what is this talking about, the truth of dependent origination? So when it's talking about truth of dependent origination, it doesn't mean just the dependent origination of the 12 links. It means that all phenomena are dependent arisings. All phenomena arise in dependence on not just causes and conditions, they depend on their parts, or in a more subtle sense, all phenomena depend upon the basis of imputation. Let's say my other pair, I have several pairs of glasses. The basis of imputation, the name that's given to that, and the consciousness that perceives it. That's kind of the sense of dependent origination here. The bodhisattva on the sixth ground, who on this basis sees the profound truth of dependent origination, that all phenomena are merely imputed upon their bases. In other words, they attain true cessation because of their dwelling in the most excellent perfection of wisdom. Or as Anne Klein said, whereby they attain cessation. So what cessation are they talking about? They're talking about a special kind of cessation, which we'll see in a couple of moments. Prior to this, such as on the fifth ground, the bodhisattva did not attain such cessation. we talked about attaining cessation. Remember, in that context, we were talking about cessation was synonymous with true cessation was an ultimate truth. Do you remember that conversation? All of the other schools of tenets say that cessation is a conventional truth. It's something that can be known with a conventional mind. But according to Prasangika, true cessation means that in the meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness, you are also experiencing at that moment the cessation of some of the afflictions. So, because the only thing that's appearing to your mind at that time is emptiness, that cessation is considered to be synonymous, or not synonymous, is that cessation is said to be an emptiness. Not all emptinesses are cessations, but all true cessations are emptinesses. So that's when it's talking about cessation here, it's talking about that true cessation. Prior to this, such as on the fifth ground, the Bodhisattva did not attain such cessation. There's a special cessation that's attained on the sixth ground. They did have cessation on the fifth ground, but not, what did I say? Did not attain such cessation as is attained on the sixth ground. For he has not reached superiority in the excellence of the perfection of wisdom when on the fifth ground. On the fifth ground, they had a cessation, but they didn't have this kind of cessation that's found on the sixth ground because they didn't have the superiority or the surpassing practice of the perfection of wisdom. One cannot attain the cessation through excellence in the first five perfections alone. So let me read what Anne translates here. Based on this, or as Jimpa said, let's see, or the manifest. Yeah, right. Okay. So Jimpa starts out, thus this bodhisattva on the sixth ground, she starts out that next phrase. Based on this, they abide on the sixth bodhisattva ground, seeing the profound suchness of mere conditionality, dependent arising. So she's equating mere conditionality with dependent arising. That this arises in dependence upon that. Because of this, they abide in the fully developed perfection of wisdom, whereby they attain, and then as explanatory comment, an uncommon absorption of cessation. So that's what's meant here when it says cessation. He attains true cessation. So in the actual Tibetan, it doesn't say true cessation. It just says cessation. And she puts in parentheses, an uncommon absorption of cessation. Prior to this, on the fifth ground and below, they did not attain an uncommon absorption of cessation because of not having the surpassing form of the fully developed perfection of wisdom. So if you're following Jimpa's book, you have to realize that he's added a word here. Gopa Topagyur. So it just says Gopa Topagyur. They will attain cessation. Jimpa adds the word, they attain true cessation. So the word true is not there. It's actually referring to this special kind of absorption of cessation, uncommon absorption of cessation, cessational absorption. So what does that mean? We talked about that a little before, and we'll talk about it again. I like to talk about it a lot. So in the Hinayana, let's say in the Theravada today, they still talk about cessational absorption. It's a particular state of mind that's brought about when you reach the peak of samsara, right? You're through your meditative equipoise, you achieve the first four levels of the form realm, right? And then you go through the 4 levels of the formless realm. The very top level is usually called the peak of samsara. So it's possible there, according to the Hinayana, to develop a particular kind of a meditation of cessation, even finer than that. You're in the 4th formless absorption, and you cause through meditative techniques for there to be a cessation of all of your bodily functions, and also cessation of mind, it said. So that actually from the Mahayana, we would say cessation of gross mind. So that's called cessational absorption. What is being ceased, according to them, is the body and function of body, breathing and so forth, and the functions of mind. It's sort of like you're zeroed out, you're kind of flat-lined. If that meditator would be connected to an electroencephalograph, you'd be zeroed out. That's not what's meant in the Mahayana by cessational absorption, or this uncommon cessational absorption. We'll see. So let's continue. I'll read again. Prior to this, such as on the 5th ground, the bodhisattva did not attain such cessation, for he or she had not reached superiority in the excellent perfection of wisdom. So from the Prasangika point of view, this uncommon cessational absorption depends upon having a wisdom that realizes emptiness to a greater extent than it did before. It has a superiority in wisdom. You have the same wisdom. You realize emptiness before in the 5th, the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd, 1st ground, but now because of your basis of having that concentration, you have a surpassing practice in the perfection of wisdom. One cannot attain cessation through the excellence in the first 5 perfections alone, which the Theravada would say, let's say today, would say you can have that cessational absorption, because they're not talking about it having anything to do with emptiness. They're talking about a cessation of the bodily functions and the mind. There was a book written some years ago called On Being Mindless, which is talking about this cessational absorption, mainly from the Hinayana point of view, if you ever happen to look at that. Very, very well known in Buddhist circles. Anyway, we'll talk about that again later. So Lama Tsongkhapa is saying one cannot attain the cessation, this cessational absorption through excellence in the first 5 perfections alone. So that would mean it's not the same as the Hinayana or Theravada view of cessational absorption. This ground, so it just leaves it at that. That we'll come back to that later. This ground, the 6th ground, is called the manifest ngungyur. Remember when we talked about manifest phenomena or hidden phenomena? It's called the manifest one, because here, on the basis of superiority in wisdom, the reflection-like ultimate nature of things becomes manifest. the reflection-like ultimate nature of things becomes manifest. So I'll read what Anne says here. Prior to this, on the fifth ground and below, they did not attain an uncommon absorption of cessation because of not having the surpassing form of the fully developed perfection of wisdom. One cannot attain an uncommon absorption of cessation merely through the 5 fully developed perfections of giving and so forth, the first 5 perfections. I'll just read a little bit more here in her text. Oh, I have to go back. I've got it. Oh, what's that? 150. This ground is called the manifest, Anne says. That's just where we are right now. So Jimpa says this ground is called the manifest because here, this ground is called the manifest or the approaching, Nondu Gyurpa in Tibetan, or Abhimuki. So Abhi, from Abhidharma. Abhi sometimes means higher. Abhisamaya alamkara, when we talk about clear realizations. So Abhimuki, Muki means face, Mukha means face. So Abhimuka means directly facing, or as she translates it, the approaching or the manifest. Because it's called that because the reflection-like nature of phenomena has become manifest by way of the 6 Bhumi Bodhisattvas' wisdom, which is surpassing in the way just described. Okay, so having said that, Mikhail, you disappeared. So you have a question?
Yeah, just to be sure, reflection-like nature is like illusion-like nature. It's the same?
It's related, but not exactly the same. We will talk about that again when we get into an explanation of that. The reflection-like nature of phenomena. So what does that mean? Phenomena are like reflections. What does that mean? When you see your reflection of your face in the mirror, say you're washing or you're shaving, you're washing your face, or you're taking off your makeup or putting on makeup, or you're shaving your beard if you're a man, or maybe you're shaving your beard if you're a woman, or putting on makeup if you're a man also, possibly. Anyway, you see a reflection in there. That's not you, right? It looks like you. And even ordinary beings, without realizing emptiness, know that a reflection is not the actual thing. So that's what's being talked about here when we talk about reflection-like nature of phenomena has become manifest in a way, and it has become manifest by way of their wisdom, which is surpassing. Okay, let me continue. So the second reason here, it's called the manifest or the approaching, because here, on the basis of superiority and wisdom, the reflection-like ultimate nature of things becomes manifest. Reflection-like nature of things become manifest. And then 2, because on the 5th ground, the Bodhisattva took the true paths as their object, or as Anne says, on the 5th ground, they observed true paths. And then in parentheses, in terms of commentary, she says, and thus have newly gained complete wisdom with respect to the 4 truths. Remember when we talked about on the 5th ground, they had a special wisdom of the 4 noble truths. So that's what's being referred to here. This is because on the 5th ground, the Bodhisattva took true paths as their object. So that means they took the 4 noble truths as their object. And 3rd, because the Bodhisattva now turns to the to the attributes of perfect Buddhahood, or and says they are approaching the attainment of a perfect Buddha's qualities. So when he says the Bodhisattva now turns to the attributes of perfect Buddhahood, it's the same word, approaching, abhimukti. So you've probably heard that word mukha, when it's a four-faced Mahakala or something. Mukha means face, ordinary word. Do you say that in Sanskrit, in Hindi, Snehi? Okay. Whereas Sumbash, do you know the word?
Yes, you do. It's called muk. Muk.
All right. I often joke that modern Hindi leaves off the final A, like instead of saying marga, you say marg for path, or
Same in Bengali in this case, yeah.
Come again?
Same in Bengali in this case, even though usually they have the A at the end, but yeah, not in this case.
Right. So, Bill.
The wisdom-like is a mirror-like wisdom is associated with akshobhya among the Dhyani Buddhas, and which is also associated with the Vajra, and I would say then associated with the tantric path too.
Right. So here it doesn't say mirror-like; it says reflection-like.
Well, a mirror.
Yeah, the mirror reflects, but it's not talking about the mirror. It's talking about the reflection. So a little bit different.
It's associated with akshobhya, and I would say, but I guess I'm wrong. No problem.
So when you talk about the mirror-like wisdom of akshobhya in the Tantra path, that's talking about something else. That's talking about a deeper kind of gnosis. Here, it's not talking about that. This is just talking about, let's see, what do it say? This ground is called the abhimukhi, or approaching or manifest, because for one reason, the reflection-like nature of phenomena has become manifest by way of their wisdom. That means they've realized the ultimate nature of phenomena, that phenomena are empty of existing the way they appear. The way they appear is the way that a reflection appears. It looks like something, but it is not that thing. That's kind of what's being gotten at here. Okay, how are we doing? Making sense? Sheila, how are you? Are you lost? You're lost. You nodded. You're not lost. You're okay.
No, I'm
You're
sort
okay.
of lost.
Okay. Oh,
I'm
you're sort
hanging
of
in there.
okay. You're kind of lost. Okay. So you were nodding that you were lost. I thought you were saying you were okay. So who is M iPhone? Just out of curiosity. I don't recognize that. Who is that? Is that Sister Zabriskie? No. Who can you unmute for a second? Does anyone know who that is? 3. Okay. No, don't worry. Okay. So
M, not 3.
M. Okay. I'm not sure who M is. Okay. Probably someone we know, but so let's continue a little bit. Are you sufficiently lost? Diana, are you following?
I'm hanging in there.
Hanging in there, yeah. So this is something you have to go back again and read, I think, with the commentary, but that Anne Klein puts in brackets. for instance, when it just talks about cessation, Jimpa had said true cessations. Although the cessation here is a true cessation, the word true cessation is not there. It's actually referring to this uncommon cessational absorption from the Mahayana. So it's in this state that we encountered this before. Remember when we talked about the bodhisattva on the first ground surpassed the hearers and solitary realizers by merit, right? Because if they were born in the lineage and so forth, they wouldn't surpass them in wisdom until when? Do you remember from that, Stephen? What was that point?
That would be the seventh ground.
Yeah, you got a hint from Doris, who was up there putting up 7 fingers. I'm teasing.
I should have been watching, Doris, but we actually talked about it on Thursdays.
Right. So, right. So on the 7th ground, what was this particular point that they about that cessational absorption, Stephen? That
it was that a bodhisattva on the 7th ground could enter a meditative stabilization on emptiness in an instant.
Right. They could
and come out.
They could enter into this cessational absorption, as a matter of fact, in an instant, and come out of it in an instant. Or maybe they could come in and out in an instant. So here we're not talking about that's in the 7th ground. Right now, we're talking about just having that special cessational absorption. So that's the context here of this cessational absorption. That's the same one that was mentioned earlier and will be talked about in the 7th ground. Okay. Did someone have another question? Okay. So Jimpa continues.
And I remember that I mentioned that Chuden Rinpoche had said that he was at the 7th ground, implied because he could do that. So yeah.
Oh, did he? Okay. That's good to know. Okay. Who is this? Chuden Rinpoche, or what did you say?
Chuden Rinpoche, yeah.
Chuden Rinpoche, right, who taught at Land of Medicine, Buddha a lot. So the explanation of the commentary, and reading further in Jimpa's translation, this is referring to Jayananda, who wrote the only Sanskrit commentary to Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Vatara Bhasham. Madhyamaka Vatara generally means the karikas, the verses. Madhyamaka Vatara Bhasham refers to Chandrakirti's own auto commentary. So he had the karikas, the verses, and then he had his own commentary, what that verse meant underneath it. And the only commentary in Sanskrit of that was by this Indian pundit Jayananda. And that's called the explanation of the commentary. Commentarial explanation, Anne Klein calls it. The explanation of the commentary interprets the second reason here. What was the second reason? That because on the 5th ground, the Bodhisattva took the true paths as his object. So the Jayananda's commentary interprets the second reason here in terms of the path by which the non-perception of cognition and its object becomes manifest. And that is that note 265 just refers to that text by Jayananda. However, the description of how on the 5th ground the Bodhisattva took the true path as his object. So he's got in quotations. However, the description of how, quote, on the 5th ground the Bodhisattva took the true path as his object, unquote, simply refers to the last of the 4 truths. The meaning, in other words, is that the Bodhisattva on the 5th ground became well-versed in the coarse and subtle aspects of the 4 noble truths. And on the 6th ground, the wisdom versed in the 4 truths comes to full realization. Okay, so this sounds a little bit complicated, right? So Anne translates it this way. With respect to the meaning of the second reason, which is why the sixth ground is called the manifest, the second reason for that, Jayananda's commentarial explanation incorrectly explains that this second reason to be that bodhisattvas manifest a path which knower and known are not observed. So what is that referring to? Does anyone know? Knower and known.
Is it that type of mind which is completely seized, stopped? A state of concentration?
I don't think that it could refer to that. I don't think it refers to that. Generally, when we talk about perception or knowing something, there's always something which is known and the knower, right? So in the various systems, if you were to have a state, what are you saying? Why is it called manifest? In which knower and known are not observed. So it could refer to that, or it could refer to some other kind of like Chittamatra system or Svatantrika system, where that which is known, there's no appearance of that which is known, and there's no appearance of the knower. So it could mean that you are merged with the object, such that there's no perception of yourself as the knower and no perception of the object as that being known. You're just merged with that in a non-conceptual state. You're not thinking, I am knowing that, and so forth. Let me read a little bit more what she said. So Jayananda's commentarial explanation incorrectly explains this second reason to be that the bodhisattvas manifest a path in which knower and known are not observed. However, on the fifth ground, true paths are observed is a case. However, that on the fifth ground, true paths are observed is a case of referring to the four truths by way of mentioning the last of the four truths. So in other words, when it says, what does Jimpa say here? Took true path as his object. That's meaning he's referring to all four truths by just referring to the last one, which is true paths, right? What are the four noble truths? Who can I ask? Diana, what are the four noble truths?
The truth of suffering, the cause of suffering, the truth of cessation, and the truth of the path.
The truth of the path is the last one, right?
Yeah.
So actually, instead of saying the cause of suffering, it says the origination of suffering, which among the four attributes of that could be inferred as the cause, but the actual name is origination of suffering. So suffering, origination of suffering, cessation, and path. Those are four noble truths. However, that on the fifth ground, true paths are observed, that statement, that is a case of referring to the four truths by way of mentioning the last of the four truths. Hence, since on that fifth ground, bodhisattvas attain skill with regard to the coarse and subtle four truths, we studied that on the fifth ground, right? They had a special wisdom there about the four truths. Hence, since on the fifth ground, bodhisattvas attain skill with regard to the coarse and subtle four truths, on the sixth ground, the wisdom that is comprised of skill with regard to the four truths is now complete. On the fifth ground, they attained a skill in that, the coarse and subtle Four Truths. On the sixth ground, it becomes complete because now they have the surpassing perfection of wisdom. Okay, so Jimpa's text says, the meaning, in other words, is that the bodhisattva on the fifth ground becomes versed in the coarse and subtle aspects of the Four Noble Truths. And on the sixth ground, the wisdom versed in the Four Truths comes to full realization. Okay, so Jimpa's text continues. Oh, Sumaj. Sorry, Snake, I saw his hand was more brilliant. I called him first. Okay, we'll get to you in a second.
So, Venerable George, just to backtrack a little bit, right?
Yeah.
When we first enter the very first bhumi, the reason for having achieved the first bhumi, which is the path of seeing, is because in meditative, while in meditation, you actually see emptiness directly, right? And that stage is a kind of a perfection of wisdom, isn't it? Because you can see emptiness.
It's a kind of, yeah. It's not the surpassing perfection of wisdom. It's not the perfection of wisdom. The perfection of wisdom is actually the Buddhahood, the wisdom of a Buddha. So no one other than a Buddha has the perfection of wisdom. So we have practice of the perfection of wisdom from the first bhumi.
Yes.
We have practice of it. We have a surpassing practice of it on the sixth bhumi. We have the actual perfection of wisdom upon Buddhahood.
Thank you. You've already answered my question. I was trying to differentiate between these stages, the first, sixth, and the end point.
Right. Okay. Good.
And you've helped. Thank you.
So we could say on the first bhumi, on all the bhumis, we have perfection of wisdom. You could even say before that, if you've realized on the path of preparation. So that's before the bhumis, right? Path of accumulation and path of preparation come before the path of seeing, where the first bhumi starts. So even before that, on the path of preparation, when you have a inferential realization of emptiness with the union of calm abiding and penetrative insight, shamatha vipassana, you realize emptiness. You could say that you have a practice of the perfection of wisdom, even there. Snehi, what are you thinking?
Venerable George, I was following along the Ankline text, and I was curious, what does it mean to say true paths are observed?
So, I was saying, so you're reading line, however, that on the fifth ground, true paths are observed. So that's what Jimpa has in quotation in his text. He says, however, the description of how, quote, on the fifth ground, bodhisattvas took the true path as his object. That's referring to that statement in the text. So what this is quoting Chandrakirti, because he's saying, he's using that shorthand to say that, what is it, as his object, where she says observed. The word observed or object is the Tibetan word mikpa, which can mean either an object that is observed or the act of observing. So she says the Four Truths are observed, or you could say, as Jimpa says, the Four Truths are his object, their object. So, of course, the Four Truths are the object of meditation on emptiness from the first bhumi. When you talk about what you're meditating on, you could say, oh, you're meditating on the emptiness of fire or the emptiness of the person. But actually, when you achieve the path of seeing, you're meditating on the emptiness of the Four Noble Truths. they are your object. You're realizing that suffering is not inherently existent, that the origination of suffering, which is karma and klesha, are not inherently existent, that cessation exists, but it is not inherently existent, and that the path leading to cessation is not inherently existent. You realize that all along the line. But on the fifth ground, you have that special kind of concentration, having a special skill in the coarse and subtle aspects of the Four Noble Truths. They are your object, or they are observed. How does she translate it? However, that on the fifth ground, true paths are observed. That's the same as Jimpa saying, the fifth ground, the Bodhisattva took the true path as his object. The word object, he's translates as mikvah as object. She says she's using it as the being observed.
Thank you. And I'm so sorry, but I have forgotten, what are the coarse and subtle aspects of the Four Noble Truths? What is that referring to?
So, okay. So when we talk about the Four Noble Truths, that's easy. Then there are, each one has four aspects. They are mainly states of mind that you engage in understanding to more correctly understand, let's say, the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. What are the four aspects of the first noble truth, Nadine? You remember? I didn't call on you yet, so I felt you were feeling unattended to.
Impermanent, suffering, empty, selfless.
Selfless, right? Perfect, right? Exactly. So those are called the four aspects of the first noble truth. So impermanence is to be understood that's to overcome the misconception that sufferings are permanent and so forth. And that suffering means that sufferings, the same word, dukkha or dugnal in Tibetan, some people might not realize that some of them say contaminated happiness is actually the nature of suffering. So that's to help overcome that. So those are called the aspects. So there are four aspects for each truth, so 16 altogether. So you can go about them in a gross way, and you can go about realizing them in a subtle way. I don't recall off the top of my head what the difference between the gross and subtle is. That in her text here, or where is that when you talk about gross and subtle?
In Thupten Jinpa's text on page 158, the first paragraph, where he
So I
says,
don't know this page number. So what was the paragraph say?
It says, the meaning, in other words, is that the Bodhisattva on the fifth ground became versed in the coarse and subtle aspects of the Four Noble Truths. And on the sixth ground, the wisdom versed in the four truths comes to full realization.
Right. I don't see exactly where that is. So I will.
It's in Anne Klein's text too.
Yeah. She has 5 pages, starting page 51 on this coarse and subtle aspect of the 16 aspects.
Okay, so that's coming up, right? Mikhail?
In the introduction, page 51.
Oh, page 51. Okay,
yeah.
So we can get to that in our discussion group on Monday, or also we'll revisit that again next class. Right now, I'm not prepared to. I don't recall exactly the difference.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Mikhail. Thank you. Okay, so Jimpa's text says, So he said, the meaning, in other words, is that the bodhisattva on the fifth ground becomes versed in the coarse and subtle aspects of the Four Noble Truths. And on the sixth ground, the wisdom versed in the Four Truths comes to full realization. Okay, because the fifth ground was able to delve into them, but it didn't reach its culmination until the sixth ground, because on the basis of the fifth ground concentration, now the wisdom can be surpassing on the sixth ground and to get into those gross and subtle aspects more detail. So the text continues. The first reason indicates how the wisdom versed in the sequential and reverse order of the 12 links of dependent origination comes to full realization here on the sixth ground. What was the first reason? If you just go back to just the paragraph above, it said the manifest one becomes, the ground is called the manifest one because here on the basis of superiority in wisdom, the reflection-like ultimate nature of things becomes manifest. So Jimpa translates Lama Tsong Khapa's commentary there. The first reason indicates how the wisdom versed in the sequential and reverse order of the 12 links of dependent origination comes to full realization here on the sixth ground. Thus, the meaning here is that on the basis of the full realization of these two trainings in wisdom, that is, what are these two trainings? The training in the Four Noble Truths and on dependent origination have come to be manifestly known by the bodhisattva. Okay, so how does Anne translate that? The first reason above, which states that the reflection-like nature of phenomena, the emptiness of inherent existence, which is itself like a reflection in that it exists but is not truly established. So she has that in brackets as commentary. So in terms of William, when you were asking about Bill before about whether reflection-like was referring to the mirror-like gnosis of who is the mirror-like was Akshobhya. So here, what she's saying is that the emptiness of inherent existence, the first reason above, and then she has brackets. All of this is commentary now. The first reason above, which states that the reflection-like nature of phenomena, the emptiness of inherent existence, which is itself like a reflection. So when we say the reflection-like nature of phenomena, so the nature of phenomena is emptiness. So the emptiness of inherent existence is itself like a reflection in that it exists but is not truly established. That has become manifest. That statement indicates that they have completed the training in wisdom, which consists in skill in the forward procedure of entry into cyclic existence when there is ignorance and so forth. So we talked about this in other contexts. We talk about the forward and reverse order of the 12 links. So we talk about the forward order means entry, what does she say? Entry into cyclic existence. So because of ignorance, there is karmic formation. Because of the condition of karmic formation, there is imprint left in the consciousness. Consciousness is the third link. Because of consciousness, because of that condition, there is the fourth link and so forth. So that's called the forward order. And then, and the reverse procedure or the reverse order, that means of liberation from cyclic existence when ignorance is overcome, these being in terms of the 12 links of dependent arising. Hence the name the manifest means that the truths, the Four Noble Truths, and dependent arising have become manifest by way of a bodhisattva's completing these two trainings in wisdom. these two trainings regarding the Four Truths and regarding the 12 links of dependent arising or dependent origination. Let's see. Jimpa says, the first reason indicates how the wisdom versed in the sequential and reverse order. So sequential means forward, and reverse, how does she say? Reverse procedure, reverse order. Procedure or order is the same, different translation of the same word. Comes to full realization here on the sixth round. Thus, the meaning here is that on the basis of full realization of these two trainings in wisdom, training in the Four Noble Truths and training in dependent origination, they have come to be manifestly known by the Bodhisattva. Since the three trainings in wisdom, illusion-like reality, the Four Noble Truths, and the 12 links of dependent origination are fully realized on this ground, given that the more distinctly superior one's tranquility, the more distinctly superior will be one's insight, and given how on the fifth ground the Bodhisattva attained the most excellent perfection of meditative absorption, so here on the sixth ground, the perfection of wisdom comes to be most excellent. So when it's talking about these three trainings, Jimpa says, thus the meaning here, since the three trainings in wisdom, and Jimpa has those three trainings, illusion-like reality, Four Noble Truths, and the 12 links. Anne says, thus on this ground they complete the three trainings in wisdom, that is, skill regarding emptiness. So Jimpa, he says, illusion-like reality. Illusion-like reality doesn't come in the text. It's talking about reflection-like, at any rate. She says, on this ground, they complete the three trainings in wisdom. That is, skill regarding emptiness, the Four Noble Truths, and independent arising. I think that's a better way of thinking of it. Those are the three kinds of trainings in wisdom. When we talk about the three trainings, usually we talk about the higher training of morality, the higher training of concentration, and the higher training of wisdom, right? It's not talking about those three trainings. Now it's talking about three trainings of wisdom, the three trainings in wisdom with regard to emptiness, the Four Noble Truths, and dependent arising. They're complete here. Further, as much as calm abiding, shamatha, is enhanced, so much is their special insight or vipassana enhanced. And on the fifth ground, they had attained full development of the perfection of concentration or absorption, dhyana, whereby in dependence on it, here on the sixth ground, their perfection of wisdom is fully developed. So generally, we say that when we talk about the three higher trainings, we say that each of the trainings acts as a support of the next. Morality acts as a support to develop the training of concentration, because as Lama Yeshe used to say, many people want to have concentration, but they don't know the secret ingredient, the secret to achieve concentration, and that is morality. You need to have a practice of morality so that your mind is not disturbed by all sorts of thoughts. And on that basis, you can develop concentration. And likewise, to develop wisdom, it's not sufficient to just have wisdom where the mind is unstable. You see something for an instant, like going into a cave, looking at the murals in a dark cave with a butter lamp that's flickering. You see the image for a second, then it's in darkness and so forth. You need to have concentration. So concentration acts as the the factor that allows the wisdom to become surpassing on the sixth ground. Further, as much as calm abiding is enhanced, that means on the fifth ground, concentration, so much is their special insight, their vipassana or wisdom, enhanced on the sixth ground. And on the fifth ground, they attain full development of the perfection of concentration, whereby independence on it, here on the sixth ground, their perfection of wisdom is fully developed. Therefore, an uncommon absorption in cessation, that is, a wisdom consciousness directly realizing emptiness within the context of cessation of coarse discrimination and feeling, is attained from this ground. So here's the essence here of what is talking about cessational absorption here. It's not talking about cessation of the mind, as in the hinayana or the bodily functions. It's talking about, as she has in parentheses here, that is, a wisdom consciousness directly realizing emptiness within the context of the cessation of coarse discrimination and feeling that is attained from this ground. Okay, so we're going to talk about that more next time. How are we doing? Are you completely bananas? You okay? What do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Venerable George. I had a question about the reflection-like nature of phenomena.
Right.
I guess I'm kind of intrigued by it, like Bill is. And
yeah.
so there's a quotation from His Holiness, and he talks, I think it's like it, or maybe it isn't. Maybe you can help me. The mind's nature is clarity and cognizance. Clarity, so he's talking about the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Clarity refers to the immateriality of the mind, the fact that it cannot be apprehended by our physical senses and is not made of atoms. Clarity also indicates the mirror-like quality of the mind, the fact that it can reflect objects. And then he quotes Dharmakirti from Pramanavartika,
right,
where Dharmakirti says, therefore, my own mind is clear by virtue of its own nature of clarity, by virtue of other objects being transferred and illuminated in it. This makes it clear too. So are we talking about the same thing here or something different?
So there are various meanings of clarity. So the basic definition that is famed, those of you remembered from Lurig, I think, or maybe Mind, Lurig. Mind is that which is clear and knowing. So in that definition that you were reading from His Holiness says cognizance, I think. He says, what did he say? Clarity and cognizance? Is that what you quoted? Something like that. So clarity has different meanings. On a very basic meaning, it means it's not material. So that's very important because in Dharmakirti's explanation of the continuity of consciousness, how consciousness continues into future lives and has come from the past, the fact that it is not based on material, that it is not form, right? Of the three kinds of impermanent phenomena, what are they, Stephen? Do you know three kinds of impermanent phenomena?
Space, analytical cessation, and non-analytical cessation.
No, impermanent.
Oh, it's permanent, impermanent.
Yeah, three kinds of impermanent phenomena. Nadine, do you know?
Form, consciousness, and non-compositional
factors, right? So form is impermanent. Consciousness is different than form, and it is impermanent. So it is not form in that sense. So when we say it is clear in knowing, in the very basic sense, you can say that it is not form, so that it has its own continuity, and it can continue even when you leave the the form aggregate, right? On a subtler level, it's talking about its reflective-like nature, in the sense that whatever impinges upon consciousness, the consciousness takes on that aspect in the same way that if you put a candle before a mirror, the image in the mirror takes on the same aspect as the candle. Okay, and in a more subtle sense, it's referring to the consciousness's lack of obstructing the entry or, absorption of content of the mind. There's no obstruction to the entering good qualities or even the entering of bad qualities and the exit of them. That's what we call the conventional Buddha nature or the developmental Buddha nature. So there's varying levels of sophistication of that. And even the first one, the fact that it is not form, is important when you talk about the continuity of consciousness, to prove that at the any moment of consciousness arises from a previous moment of consciousness. You can't create a new consciousness simply with material. Like people are thinking that they can, in the laboratory, create by putting together atoms and molecules. They can create an artificial life in the test tube, right? Even not using the maybe the egg and sperm and so forth, or maybe even using those, that just putting them together, that there will be consciousness as a result of that. Consciousness has its own continuity. It comes into that form aggregate at a certain point when there's the right karma. Okay, does that help a little bit, Stephen? Does that answer your question? Okay. Anyone else have a thought?
So I have I don't know, maybe this is going off topic here, but I mean, that kind of made me think. I mean, like,
I'm glad. Yeah.
Unusual for me. So now we talk a lot about, artificial intelligence and all this stuff. It doesn't matter whether it's whether people argue about whether it's sentient or not, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say that you get, theoretically speaking or hypothetically speaking, that you get to a point where this thing supposedly is sentient, right? Does that mean that its consciousness then is essentially, that consciousness is also a product of some other previous moment of consciousness, right?
So you're jumping the gun here. What are you talking about? You're talking about something that's already happened or theoretically going to happen. What are you saying?
I guess I'm saying that it's theory. I mean, right now there is no such thing as a conscious artificial intelligence. But my question is,
well, so let me just we'll continue this on Monday, but let me just say this. So we're talking about two different things here: artificial intelligence becoming conscious. That's one thing, and being able to create consciousness in a living form, like a living being, simply by putting atoms together. They're two different questions. But let's say artificial intelligence, let's say a computer. I've mentioned this a couple of times before. His Holiness was asked about this in one of the Mind Life seminars, I guess they were called. Discussion with scientists, particularly. Oh, Sheila's cat just went by. Sheila, what's your cat's name?
Her name's Betty.
Hey, Betty.
When she comes to class, she's Betty Sattva.
Betty Sattva. Betty Sattva, I like that. So His Holiness was discussing with someone, and they said that as the computer would become more, the computer circuitry would become more and more sophisticated and mimicking mental consciousness. At a certain point, it could be actually, the person was proposing it could be sentient, could be actually be sentient. And His Holiness said that in general, consciousness is not form, is not material. So you can't create consciousness through material by simply putting circuitry together. That would not become consciousness. But there is a possibility that a consciousness could enter into that if there were the right circumstances. For instance, sometime a tree might have a consciousness, or a plant might have a consciousness that has entered into it, or something like that. In general, plants are not sentient, although you might think they are. They're not sentient beings, but a consciousness could enter that. And he said, under the right circumstances, that a consciousness could enter into a circuitry if the person, let's say, if that consciousness of the person before had a wish to do that in the future. And His Holiness pointed at the scientist and said, and you are creating that karma now, meaning that, maybe in your future life, your consciousness will enter into some circuit board and become, that circuit.
Right. And that's what I was asking. That's how I've been thinking about it, and that's what I was asking, whether that could happen. And so what you're saying is, Holiness is actually suggesting that is what could happen. Yes, okay.
Right, but that's not what the scientists are envisioning.
Right, I understand. I understand.
Yeah, no, I'm just for other. You understand, but just for the other people, that's not what the scientists are envisioning. They're imagining that circuitry, when becoming, if I'm using the right terminology, if the computational power has become sophisticated enough to mimic consciousness, that at a certain point it becomes actual conscious. The machine becomes conscious, and makes decisions on its own, and has feelings, and can be heard, and everything like that. So that would happen from the Buddhist point of view. Material cannot be consciousness, and that's the first of the three things that we were talking about before. Just an instant, one of you were asking about before what the meaning of clarity meant. The first meaning is that it is not material. Sean.
Would that be the same argument that Buddhists would use for the split brain experiment, where they sever the connection between the right and left hemisphere, and then there's like two distinct personalities that are present?
I don't know. I think you'd have to. I don't know if that ever happened in Tibet. Does that happen? Are there two different personalities? I didn't realize that was something that happened. Does anyone know? I don't see anyone nodding here.
But how is that different from, a person with multiple personalities, right? I mean, you can have the same brain, but both hemispheres connected, but you can still have multiple.
Discussion for Monday discussion group. Okay, so we're already over our time. So I think it's a good start. My suggestion is that you go back, coordinate, if you have both texts, or with your notes, coordinate, try to go over what Jimpa translated, or if you're using Anne's book, use what was mentioned in class from Jimpa's if you don't have that. If you have both of them, look at them and see what's being, how one translation may be superior in certain circumstances. I think in general in this section, Anne's translation is vastly superior in bringing in the explanation about what cessation and reflection and so forth means. Shankar, you have a thought?
I just have a question. I find Jinpa's translation so far in general to be somewhat inscrutable. It's like reading Dickens, when I used to read Dickens, you have to read the long sentence with all the semicolons in between 5 times to kind of make sense of what's happening. But both Hopkins and now Anne Klein are much, much more readable and understandable. Is this just is Jimpa just in love with himself or his language? I don't understand.
I remember talking to him in the cafe in when I was teaching at Sarah, he showed up with his wife suddenly, and I met him in this little Dalbot place, and we're discussing, and I was talking about Hopkins' translations, how you could see every single word of the Tibetan there, and he said, oh, he didn't like that, and he has his own style. So in general, I think he may claim that you can infer from his translation the parenthetical explanation that Anne puts in her translation. Her parenthetical comments or bracketed comments explaining what certain things mean are not just her own opinion. They are drawn from the Kensur, the former abbot's commentary on that and discussion with that, and from other texts. So I think that's a good thing to use those two to go back and forth and try to read a little bit ahead for our next class. Okay. So any last scratch itch that needs to be scratched? Diana, you okay? Samvansh, how are you? You okay? Anna, I didn't call on you today. You're okay? Doris, Mikhail, Sneh?
Venerable George?
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that I had posted a link in the chat to the FPMT Master's Program translation that, Olga shared with us.
Right.
Did you want people to also read that?
Okay, so for this first section, Venerable Joan, right? Venerable Joan. It's exactly this from Anne Klein's book. She didn't do her own translation of this because Anne spent years on these first couple of verses, and with all of the commentary and everything. So there's no need to refer to that yet. I'm going to write to Olga, who was in charge of us being allowed to use that, just to mention she had made some mandate that whenever the word what is it? The word that she's translating as falling hairs, which usually means in general can mean defective sight and can sometimes mean cataracts. She said, now everywhere is always falling hairs, but in some contexts it actually means cataracts. So I'm going to have to write to her about that and say that's not a good decision to make. But in general, that would be good to have. And if it's revised, to have that. But we don't need that until Anne Klein's, the section that we're reading that Anne Klein has, until that's finished, because what Joan did is she got permission from Anne to put into her translation, Anne Klein's translation, and then she begins from there going on with a couple of other places where Jeffrey Hopkins provided information, which she has in there. So that will be good for us. After Anne's finished, that will be our other source for comparing to Jimpa. Okay. Everyone okay? Okay, so let's do our dedication prayers and long life prayers, Shanka or whoever. And don't forget, Monday we have discussion group if you'd like to attend. Whoever M iPhone is. There we go.
I'm sorry about my dogs. Let me put myself in.
That's okay. Okay. So due to these virtues, Gewa Di, it doesn't say to the merits, because we've also created a collection of wisdom, which is not merit, right? So that the translation due to these merits is not correct. Gewa Di means due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that very state. Here it doesn't say that enlightened state. Dei Sala, to that. Dei means that level, to that state. May I set them in that. May the supreme precious bodhicitta, which has not arisen, arise and grow. And may that which has already arisen in our consciousness not diminish, but increase more and more. And so we don't have long life for Lama Zopa. There's a prayer for the, right after that, maybe the long life prayer of the Dalai Lama and other friends. Okay. You gurus who are eyes, my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, you allow me to see them and understand them. That's what means eyes. You are the supreme gateway for us fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging as you will with skillful means, moved by love. All illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. Is after that, is there's the Dalai Lama long life prayer right after that? That's it.
Venerable, remember when we were putting these prayers together, you mentioned that this prayer would do for all our gurus. So
okay, that's excellent. And so now the prayer for the quick recognition of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's return. Oh, that is there? Oh, that is there. Okay. Peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this request. And so many of you know in these prayers for quick return or long life and so forth, the Lama's name is often embedded within the context of the prayer. That's why it says here, in holding and spreading the Munis, Tup, complete and precious teachings, 10, that means Tupten, and then patience, Sopa. So that has his name embedded in there. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and for mother sentient beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At this, I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of the mind generation, the bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, the children of the victorious ones, made the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And then just make a concentrated dedication that whatever virtues we've created today because of our motivation at the beginning, that which we've created in the past of this lifetime, numberless lives in the past that is not yet ripened, those virtues that we will create in the future, dedicate them all that we might quickly become Buddha by practicing the stages of the path, developing renunciation, bodhicitta, the right view of emptiness, practicing perhaps the tantric path to quickly achieve enlightenment for the sole sake of removing living beings from suffering, placing into the everlasting happiness of enlightenment. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And then seal that conventional dedication in the emptiness of the three spheres. One way of thinking of it is that the merits that we are dedicating appear to us, the virtues, the collection of wisdom, have a conventional appearance to our mind. We can conjure up actions that we've done, but those are merely imputed by our mind. They do not inherently exist. The goals dedicated to appear to our mind. They only imputed by mind, conventionally, they have no inherent existence. And the act of dedication itself, trying to link these virtues with those goals, that's just a process that can't be found anywhere. It's just a name imputed to this. It is not inherently existent. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Look forward to seeing you next week. If you can come on Monday, that would be great. If whoever is in charge of the recording could get us the link, I'll send it off to a couple of people who missed today and a whole slew of people in other countries that are hoping to continue. Take care. See you soon.
Also,
Thank you,
I
Venerable George.
Yeah.
Thank you, Venerable George.